me about my daughter!
Daddy, no!
Hello everyone, welcome back to yet another marvelous video. You know what keeps us up at night? It's not the vampires, the werewolves, or even those creepy dolls that somehow keep getting movie franchises. Nope, it's the monsters that could actually exist within our world that really get under our skin. In today's video, we're going to take a look at films that deal with what could be the most terrifying monsters of all, just some regular old humans, only they have a taste for blood and flesh. So guys, sit back and enjoy as we dive into the 20 best cannibal movies of all time. Before we get too far ahead of ourselves though, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The Silence of the Lambs, 1991. Let's start with The Silence of the Lambs, directed by Jonathan Demme. When you think of cannibals in film, let's be honest, your mind probably jumps straight to Hannibal Lecter, and for good reason. Based on the iconic novels by Thomas Harris, this movie gave us one of the most chilling and oddly captivating characters in movie history. Anthony Hopkins as Lecter was unforgettable, and Jodie Foster as Clarice Starling was equally powerful. The story follows Clarice, a young FBI trainee, as she's sent to interview the imprisoned Lecter to help catch another killer on the loose. Sounds simple enough, right? But what really hooks you is not just the hunt for a murderer, it's the twisted, tense, almost hypnotic back and forth between Clarice and Lecter. Their dynamic is the heartbeat of the whole film. Now, it's important to say that the film has been rightly criticized for its portrayal of certain communities, especially in how it handles LGBTQ+ representation. Those conversations matter, but even without those critiques, there's no denying the impact this movie has had on both the thriller and horror genres. Why does The Silence of the Lambs deserve a spot on our list? Before this, cannibalism in movies wasn't that popular, but Hopkins' portrayal of Lecter made the idea mainstream in a way that no one expected. Hannibal Lecter is practically a household name these days, a cannibalistic serial killer who became one of the most fascinating characters in film history. That's pretty wild when you think about it. What makes it special is how the film treats cannibalism. It's not just shock value here. Lecter's cannibalism is presented as this perverse intellectual thing, the ultimate expression of his belief in his superiority. The film deserves its spot because it elevated the cannibal character from a mindless savage to a complex psychological study. Decades later, people still reference Lecter's hissing sounds and quote his lines. Cannibal Holocaust, 1980. We can't talk about cannibal movies without bringing up one of the most infamous titles of all time, Cannibal Holocaust, directed by Ruggero Deodato. When it first came out, audiences believed they were watching actual footage of people being murdered in the jungle. It was one of the earliest uses of the found footage format, and it was so convincing that the director was literally arrested for murder. He had to prove in court that the actors were still alive. The premise is simple but effective. A documentary crew heads out into the Amazon, encounters a cannibal tribe, and things go horribly wrong. What makes it stand out is not just the shocking gore, and trust us, there's plenty of that, but how it flips the script on who the real monsters are. The film is basically screaming at us about media exploitation and our obsession with graphic content long before social media made that conversation mainstream. The movie kind of turns the camera back on us, asking, what are we willing to watch for entertainment? Now, I have to mention that this film has some seriously problematic elements. The on-camera killing of actual animals was something that happened, and that is something that rightfully disturbs viewers even to this day. It's banned in multiple countries even now, 4 decades later. It changed horror cinema forever, and that's why it's on our list. Few films have matched its intensity or sparked as much controversy. Even the characters in the movie admit some footage is too disturbing to be shown. That's why, as problematic as it is, any serious discussion of cannibal cinema has to include this landmark shocker that still has the power to disturb viewers today. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1974. Let's talk about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre next. If you haven't seen this classic slasher, here's the deal. We follow 5 teenagers, Sally, her brother Franklin, her boyfriend Jerry, and their friends Kirk and Pam as they go through rural Texas. They're actually there for a pretty grim reason, checking on Sally's grandfather's grave after reports of grave robbing in the area. Things start going sideways when they pick up this seriously unhinged hitchhiker who ends up slashing Franklin with a razor and smearing blood on their van. The group decides to go to an old family property nearby, completely unaware that they've just wandered into the neighborhood of what might be cinema's most disturbing family. Soon, they're being hunted down by Leatherface, a massive guy wearing a mask made from human skin who's swinging around a chainsaw. The film doesn't follow a complex plot. There's no deep mystery or grand twist. These kids are basically treated like livestock, which brings this disturbing parallel between cannibalism and how we process meat in slaughterhouses. Pretty heavy stuff when you think about it, right? This movie basically wrote the rulebook that every slasher film after it either followed or deliberately subverted. And Leatherface, of course, became horror royalty. This film also talks about the politics of very compelling issues, industrial slaughter and meat processing, and fans have also recognized how it puts forth the ethics of slaughtering and how people mostly overlook it. It makes you question who the real animals are in a way that still feels shocking today. Raw, 2017. Next up on our list is Raw, and this French horror gem absolutely blew people away when it hit the festivals. Some cannibal movies are about survival, some are about power, but then you've got stuff like Raw, which flips the whole idea on its head and makes cannibal a metaphor for growing up, identity, and craving in every sense of the word. The story follows Justine, a sheltered vegetarian starting vet school. During a brutal hazing ritual, she's forced to eat raw meat, and that one bite changes everything. At first, it's just a craving for animal meat, but soon it turns into something darker and more dangerous. She's drawn to human flesh, and no matter how hard she tries to fight it, the hunger will not go away. What makes Raw so fascinating is that it is told entirely from the cannibal's point of view. You're not watching some monster from the outside, you are the monster, feeling that internal struggle, that mix of fear, desire, shame. It's not framed as a traditional horror. It's intimate, messy, and human. What's really compelling is watching Justine try to fight these urges. She's desperately trying to be normal while these cravings are just consuming her from the inside out. It becomes this perfect metaphor for those college years when you're just figuring out who you really are versus who society expects you to be. Her relationship with this guy Adrian and the seriously complicated dynamic with her sister Alexia just amps up the tension. There's this incredible scene, well, several actually, where you can see her literally fighting against her own body's desires, and when her secret eventually comes out, the rejection she faces hits way too close to home for anyone who's ever felt like an outsider. The film made headlines when people were literally passing out during the screening, but here's the thing. While Raw is definitely graphic and intense, director Julia Ducournau is doing something so much more sophisticated than just shock value. The way she shoots these scenes is almost beautiful in its brutality. There's this artistic quality to even the most disturbing moments, and Garance Marillier absolutely nails it. Her performance as Justine is vulnerable, unsettling, and totally unforgettable. You feel her confusion, her fear, her hunger. Raw isn't just about cannibalism, it's about the terrifying conflict between what you want and what you need to be in order to fit in. Bones and All, 2022. The next on our list is Bones and All, where Luca Guadagnino teams up with Timothée Chalamet again after Call Me By Your Name. But trust us, this is a very different kind of love story. The film follows Marin, played by Taylor Russell, a young woman who's just trying to make sense of a pretty terrifying truth about herself. She has this uncontrollable urge to eat people. After her dad cannot deal anymore and abandons her, she sets out to find her mom, hoping to understand where these cravings come from. Along the way, she meets Lee, who is also an eater, as they call themselves. And here's what makes this film special. While there are some pretty intense cannibalism scenes, that isn't really what the story is about at its core. These two kids are basically outcasts, rejected by their families and society, and they find this profound connection with each other because they share this terrible secret. Their romance is what drives the story forward. It's tender and passionate, but it also has this cloud hanging over it because, let's face it, their lifestyle isn't exactly sustainable. There's this incredible character named Sully, played by Mark Rylance, who is this older cannibal that kind of mentors Marin, but in the creepiest way possible. He represents this dark future they could be heading towards if they fully embrace what they are. What struck us while watching this film is how Guadagnino somehow makes their cannibalism seem almost innocent. Like these aren't calculated serial killers, they're just kids trying to survive with this condition they didn't ask for. It's not flashy like Hannibal Lecter's Fine Dining, it's raw, sad, and very human. It's not just about being outsiders or rebels either. Bones and All digs into deeper stuff. Poverty, survival, shame, that kind of hunger that sticks with you long after your stomach's full. It's strange, beautiful, and kind of devastating. Bones and All is messy, haunting, and totally unlike anything else in the genre. Bone Tomahawk, 2015. If you're looking for a Western that takes a serious left turn into horror territory, Bone Tomahawk is absolutely that film. So, Kurt Russell leads this cast alongside Patrick Wilson and Richard Jenkins. At first glance, it sets up like a classic Western. The town, the local sheriff, a rescue mission into dangerous territory, but Bone Tomahawk gives you something much darker. What's really fascinating is how the film plays with Western tropes. You go in expecting cowboys versus Indians, but what you get is much more complex. It follows Sheriff Hunt, who assembles a rescue party when the local doctor and others are kidnapped by a tribe of cannibalistic cave dwellers known as troglodytes. The rescue party consists of the sheriff, the doctor's injured husband, Arthur, elderly backup deputy Chicory, and the dangerous gunslinger Bruder. Their journey through harsh terrain becomes increasingly perilous as they track the kidnappers. There is this uncomfortable authenticity to how the white characters casually mistreat the Native Americans, showcasing the ugly reality of racism rather than Hollywood's sanitized version. Then there are the antagonists, this cannibalistic tribe that's not portrayed as indigenous peoples, but this almost otherworldly threat. When our heroes first encounter them, the film shifts gears from Western to full-on horror. These aren't your typical Western villains, not even close. The troglodytes are essentially a tribe of cannibalistic monsters with these bone-chilling, inhuman shrieks that'll make your skin crawl. When our heroes finally encounter them, the film goes from dusty Western to straight-up horror show. One of the most unsettling things about Bone Tomahawk is how casually the white characters dismiss the indigenous people, something the film doesn't shy away from, and it actually leans into that discomfort to make a point. The Forest, 1982. Next up on our list is The Forest. This 1983 film opens with a middle-aged hiking couple being brutally murdered in the Sierra Nevada wilderness. Then we meet our main characters, two couples planning a camping trip to escape city life. Sharon and Teddy head out first, with their husbands, Steve and Charlie, planning to catch up later. Sharon and Teddy encounter the ghosts of two children while camping near a waterfall. These spirits warn them about their father, John Sr., a cannibalistic hermit who hunts and eats unfortunate hikers who wander into his territory. There is this incredibly unsettling scene where Steve and Charlie unknowingly take shelter in John's cave during a rainstorm and are offered meat to eat, which, as you might have guessed, is actually Teddy's flesh. The casual way John serves human meat to unsuspecting victims adds a disturbing layer to the traditional cannibal narrative. This film is on our list because it blends the usual cannibalistic horror with supernatural elements. As the story goes on, we get to know John's tragic backstory through the children, how their abusive mother drove them to suicide, which pushed John over the edge into cannibalism. It's rare for a cannibal film to give its monster such a developed backstory, making him both terrifying and somewhat sympathetic. The premise has potential: a cannibalistic mountain man hunting campers, while the ghosts of his dead children occasionally pop up to warn victims. But the execution is where things fall apart. The kill scenes, which should be the highlight of any good cannibal flick, are a little disappointing. The cook, the thief, his wife, and her lover. If you're looking for over-the-top culinary horror, let me tell you about The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover. This film is a feast for the senses in the most disturbing way possible. Albert Spica, played by Michael Gambon, is an absolutely vile gangster who basically forced himself into ownership of this elegant restaurant called Le Hollandaise. Right from the opening scene, we see just how brutal this guy is. Every night, Spica drags his wife, Georgina, played by Helen Mirren, and his gang of thugs to the restaurant, where he loudly showcases his complete lack of class, while the cook, Richard Borst, prepares actual gourmet meals. Now, Georgina is the complete opposite of her husband. She's refined, elegant, and clearly miserable in this abusive marriage. One night, she notices the quiet bookstore owner named Michael peacefully reading while enjoying his meal. They lock eyes and they're drawn to each other. With the help of the restaurant staff, they begin this passionate affair right under her husband's nose. But when Spica eventually discovers their secret, things turn horrifically violent. In one of cinema's most disturbing scenes, he forces pages from Michael's beloved books down his throat. That is when Georgina snaps. For her revenge, she convinces the chef to prepare the ultimate forbidden meal. After her lover is murdered by her husband in this horrifically cruel way, Georgina doesn't just break down, she plots the most poetic revenge imaginable. She convinces the restaurant's chef to prepare her lover's body as a feast. As Spica consumes the meal, she reveals what he's eating before putting a bullet into his head. The film doesn't actually deal with cannibalism for most of its runtime, but man, does it deliver when it gets there. What makes this film so powerful isn't just shock value, it's how Greenaway uses cannibalism as the ultimate act of both love and revenge. Georgina offers up her lover's body as this twisted sacrifice that finally frees her from her husband's tyranny. Delicatessen, 1991. Next up, we have Delicatessen. This 1991 French dark comedy takes place in a post-apocalyptic France where food is so scarce that grain works as currency. At the center of our story is a rundown apartment building with a sinister secret. The ground floor butcher shop, run by the landlord Clappett, is not selling animal meat. He's advertising fake job openings to lure in desperate workers, then turning them into tomorrow's special for his hungry tenants. When a former circus performer named Lewison shows up for the handyman position, things get complicated. He's so charming and skilled with his trick knife that even Clappett hesitates to butcher him right away. What's worse for our butcher is that his daughter, Julie, falls head over heels for Lewison. As Clappett plots to turn Lewison into the main course, Julie reaches out to the troglodytes, these underground vegetarian rebels, to save her new love. Delicatessen uses its cannibalism as dark satire rather than shock value, showing how society can normalize the most horrific behaviors during desperate times. In the end, Clappett is killed by Lewison's boomerang knife when he throws it at the other man, but it backfires, and the apartment building finally finds peace with the butcher shop closed permanently. The film ends with Lewison and Julie making music together on the rooftop, a surprisingly sweet ending for a film where most of the characters were planning to eat the protagonist. For all those who enjoy cannibal cinema, this might be worth a glance. Trouble Every Day, 2001. The next on our list is Trouble Every Day. The film opens with a disturbing scene. We watch a woman named Corey, played by Beatrice Dow, seduce a truck driver. The aftermath is chilling. His mutilated body and her blood-covered face tell us everything we need to know about what happened between them. Soon, the newlyweds, Shane and June, go to Paris for their honeymoon, but this isn't your typical romantic getaway. Shane is secretly tracking down Dr. Leo Seminow, a scientist who just happens to be married to Corey, a woman Shane was once obsessed with. Corey has some sort of disease that transforms her erotic urges into something violent. Leo keeps his wife locked away in their home, desperately searching for a cure, while she seduces and devours any man who gets too close. In one scene, Corey seduces a young man who breaks into her home, only to literally consume him during sex, tearing out his tongue with her teeth. Shane soon ends up finding Corey, and it is only then that we realize how perfectly his desires mirror hers. He finds her at her home, covered in blood, and she tries to bite him, but Shane is stronger. He overpowers her. Shane ends up strangling her and killing her, and then he goes back to his wife. In the end, we see him do the same thing that Corey does. He brutally rapes a maid that he has been silently observing throughout, and then he bites her to death. This film is interesting because the director, Claire Denis, does not spoon-feed you answers. He lets your imagination fill in the most horrifying blanks. It's not an easy watch, but it is one that stays with you, at the back of your mind, long after it's over. Sweeney Todd, 2007. Now, let us talk about Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street, a musical directed by Tim Burton. The film has an all-star cast that includes Helena Bonham Carter, Johnny Depp, Alan Rickman, Sacha Baron Cohen, and more. Years before the story actually starts off, there was a barber named Benjamin Barker. He had a wife, a baby girl, and a peaceful little life until the corrupt Judge Turpin framed him for a crime he didn't commit and shipped him off to Australia. Benjamin escapes and returns to London with a vengeance. He takes on a new name, and it's Sweeney Todd. He reunites with his old landlady, Mrs. Lovett, who tells him what happened to his family. She runs a pie shop famous for having the worst meat pies in the city. He sets up his barber shop right above hers. Turpin ends up at Todd's barber shop, and Todd is ready to slice his throat then and there, but Anthony, who has fallen for Johanna, barges in at the worst possible time, shouting about their plan to run away together. Because of that, Turpin throws Johanna into a madhouse. That is the moment Todd snaps. He decides to kill as many people as he can just to cope, and Mrs. Lovett is all in. She comes up with the idea to bake the bodies into pies, and suddenly her business is booming. Todd even installs a trapdoor in his chair to drop the bodies straight into her bakehouse like it's some kind of industrial meat grinder. Things take a dark turn when Todd kills his own wife, thinking that she's just some random beggar. He almost kills Johanna too, but she gets away because Turpin intervenes. Todd later realizes that Mrs. Lovett lied to him and throws her into an oven, and as Todd is mourning his dead wife, his throat is slit. This film is not just about the shock of people eating people, it's about what drives someone to such extremes. Wrong Turn, 2003. Up next is Wrong Turn, the first part in the film series of the same name. In this, med student Chris decides to take a back road only to crash into an abandoned car with a group of college students on a camping trip. Jesse, Scott, Carly, Francine, and Evan. They soon realize someone sabotaged the car, and when Evan and Francine stay behind, things go from bad to worse. Soon, Evan vanishes and Francine gets brutally killed with barbed wire by one of the forest's more terrifying locals. What seems like bad luck quickly spirals into a fight for survival against three cannibals known as Three Finger, One Eye, and Sawtooth. There's this fantastic scene where our protagonists hide inside a cabin, forced to watch in horror as these cannibals butcher and feast on one of their friends. The decapitation isn't shown to us very explicitly, it's mostly implied. It's not about over-the-top horror here, but the tension built up by this, the implication of what's happening off-screen, and that's what makes it great. These guys move like ghosts through the forest, totally at home in the terrain, always one step ahead of their prey. Wrong Turn doesn't go full gore right away. In fact, other than some eerie opening credits, you don't even know that these cannibals are out for human meat until much later. There are also many sequels to this film, so if you get the time, you should check them out. Antropagus, 1980. Next on our list is Antropagus, and in this, a couple of tourists go out to a remote Greek island and get absolutely attacked by something that crawls out of the ocean. Then we cut to a group of travelers headed on a sailing trip. They pick up a woman named Julie who asks them to detour to that same creepy island to visit some friends. Once they get there, things go wrong really fast. Maggie, who is pregnant, hurts her ankle and stays on the boat. The rest explore the island only to find it completely abandoned except for one mysterious woman in black and a rotting corpse in a house. Maggie and the boat's captain don't make it. A man attacks them, rips the guy's head off, and takes Maggie. The killer turns out to be Klaus Wortmann, the dad who survived that shipwreck. He accidentally killed his wife while trying to convince her to eat their dead son to survive. Then, he ate them both and became a cannibal, and in one really disturbing scene, he even eats Maggie's unborn baby. Julie and Andy team up, and after a fight, they finally kill Klaus by impaling him with a pickaxe. But he doesn't just die like that, he literally eats his own guts before he collapses. Pretty disturbing, right? This movie is kinda interesting because the man becomes a cannibal because of a very tragic backstory. This is basically a slasher movie, and an Italian one at that. The Hills Have Eyes, 1977. Alright guys, let's talk about The Hills Have Eyes next. This is where Wes Craven really started showing us what kind of filmmaker he'd become before he gave us classics like Nightmare on Elm Street and Scream. So, this movie drops us into what starts as a typical family road trip through the Nevada desert when their car breaks down. But things go from bad to absolutely horrifying when they're hunted by a savage cannibalistic family living out in the wasteland. It's kind of like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which came out a few years earlier, and the vibes are similar, but Craven takes it in a more political direction. What makes The Hills Have Eyes so unsettling is how it flips the idea of a normal American family. Craven starts with this wholesome suburban family and then tears it apart, both literally and thematically. Who they are at the start is not who they are by the end. You can already see the hints of this clever, self-aware storytelling that Craven would become famous for later in his career. What is fascinating is watching how quickly this normal middle-class American family starts to unravel when pushed to extremes. They have to become increasingly violent just to survive against these cannibals. The line between the family and the savage cannibals gets blurrier as the film progresses. It completely flips the script on that classic final survivor trope we all know from slasher films. Instead of cutting down our protagonists to just one survivor who makes it to the end credits, The Hills Have Eyes leaves us with Doug, Brenda, and Bobby as our final trio. These three are the only ones left in this family. All their loved ones have been killed, and even the baby has been stolen. This film might be rough around the edges and definitely more intensely violent than his later work, but you can clearly see him asking the questions that would define his career. What makes a monster? And are we really that different from them when we're pushed to our limits? Dumplings, 2004. Next up is the 2004 movie Dumplings that was adapted from Lillian Lee's novella of the same name. At the center of this story is Mrs. Lee, and she's a former actress whose glory days are far behind her. Her husband is cheating, her confidence is shattered, and she's desperate to feel young again. She's desperate enough to seek out Aunt May, this mysterious former gynecologist who sells special dumplings that supposedly turn back the clock. The twist is that May's secret ingredient is aborted fetuses. What makes Dumplings so effective is how it plays out like this twisted fairy tale. Mrs. Lee knows exactly what she's eating, but her obsession with reclaiming her youth and her husband's attention drives her deeper into this moral abyss. The film brilliantly sets up this parallel between Mrs. Lee's consumption of youth and her husband's appetite for younger women. He even eats balut, which are fertilized eggs that have unhatched chicks. What elevates Dumplings beyond simple shock value is how it deals with some heavy themes about beauty standards and what women are pushed to do in societies that value them primarily for their looks and fertility. As Mrs. Lee becomes more desperate, watching her moral decay is arguably even more disturbing. On top of all this, Aunt May ultimately betrays Mrs. Lee by sleeping with her husband. This film is on our list because it uses its premise to deliver a scathing commentary on beauty obsession and the commodification of women's bodies. Fresh, 2022. Before Daisy Edgar Jones was outrunning tornadoes and twisters, she was surviving something way more disturbing in Fresh alongside Sebastian Stan. On the surface, it starts off like a quirky modern-day dating story. Noah, played by Edgar Jones, meets Steve in the produce aisle of all places, and he's charming, funny, and kinda perfect. Maybe too perfect. Their meet-cute seems ideal until Steve reveals his true nature. Noah accepts Steve's invitation to a weekend getaway at his isolated home. There, she discovers his horrifying true identity. He's not just a doctor, but a human butcher who imprisons women, harvests their flesh piece by piece, and sells premium meat to wealthy clients with exclusive tastes. Noah realizes that Steve is attracted to her, and she tries to charm him by flirting with him and also showing interest in cannibalism. Steve ends up cooking food for her made of human meat. As Noah fights for survival alongside Steve's other captive victims, her best friend Molly becomes suspicious of her disappearance and begins investigating. Soon, she too gets tangled up in this and ends up as another of Steve's victims. The film follows these women as they try to get away from him. What makes Fresh stand out amongst cannibal films is how it uses its premise as a brutal metaphor for how women are often treated as consumable products in the dating world. The film doesn't just rely on shock value, it gives us a protagonist who refuses to accept her fate and fights back with incredible determination. The film brilliantly blends dark comedy with genuinely tense horror sequences. Ravenous, 1999. Let's move on to the next one, Ravenous from 1999, a film that mixes horror, dark comedy, and Western elements into something truly unique. Set during the 1840s Mexican-American War, Ravenous follows Captain John Boyd, played by Guy Pearce, who shipped off to a remote military outpost in the Sierra Nevada mountains after an act of cowardice accidentally makes him look like a hero. Things take a bizarre turn when a half-dead traveler named Cocoon staggers into their camp with a horrifying tale. He claims his wagon train was stranded in the mountains, and the survivors resorted to cannibalism to stay alive. Even worse, one man developed a taste for human flesh and started hunting the others. When Boyd and his fellow soldiers venture out to investigate, they discover Cocoon is not exactly the victim he claimed to be. Cocoon, or Ives, has been consuming flesh because of its healing powers. Cocoon also manages to get Boyd to consume human flesh. The film weaves in the Native American legend of the Wendigo, the idea that consuming human flesh gives you the strength of your victims, but also curses you with an insatiable hunger for more. The film plays with this concept brilliantly. Robert Carlyle absolutely steals the show as Cocoon, shifting between pathetic victim and terrifying predator with chilling ease. The movie really mixes it all up, throwing together dark comedy and some seriously bloody moments to show just how far people will push themselves when staring death in the face. Parents, 1989. Next, we've got Parents, and this movie taps into that universal childhood fear that we've all had. You know that weird feeling you get as a kid, that suspicion that adults are hiding something from you? Like after you're tucked into bed and the lights go out, they're downstairs doing who knows what? Parents is all about that childhood paranoia. It's about that deep, unsettling hunch that your parents aren't just mysterious, they might be monsters. The story centers on 10-year-old Michael, played by Brian Madorsky, who starts to notice something is just a little off about his perfectly normal suburban life. His mom and dad, played by Mary Beth Hurt and Randy Quaid, seem like your classic normal parents who keep serving up these massive juicy meat dinners night after night. The genius of this film is how it plays with Michael's growing suspicion about where all this meat is coming from. His parents just keep saying it's leftovers, but their knowing winks and private jokes across the dinner table send chills down the kid's spine. Directed by Bob Balaban, the movie taps into that very specific fear we've all had. What if the parents raising us aren't who they say they are? It might not be the most horrifying film on the list, but Parents leaves its mark by taking something innocent, like family dinner, and turning it into a full-blown nightmare. Soilent Green, 1973. The next on our list is Soilent Green, directed by Richard Fleischer. Now, putting Soilent Green on this list is technically a spoiler, but let's be real. Even if you've never seen the movie, you've probably heard someone shout, "Soilent Green is people!" at least once in your life. Charlton Heston plays Detective Robert Thorne, and he's navigating this absolutely nightmarish version of New York City in what was supposed to be 2022. When the film was made in 1973, they imagined we would be dealing with 40 billion people on Earth, cities packed to the brim, and climate change making life almost unlivable. Sounds dramatic, right? But the scary part is how much of it still feels uncomfortably close to reality. In this world, climate change has basically wrecked everything. People are crammed into sweltering apartments, Real food is a luxury only the super rich can afford, and everyone else is surviving on these processed food wafers made by the Soilent Corporation. The newest product, Soilent Green, is supposedly made from plankton and is the most nutritious option available. When Thorne investigates the murder of a Soilent executive, he starts pulling at threads that unravel this whole conspiracy. And that's when things get really dark. I mean, if you somehow don't know the twist already, we almost envy you getting to experience that jaw-dropping moment when Heston delivers that famous line. They are processing human corpses into food wafers. It's cannibalism on an industrial scale, hidden behind corporate packaging. The real horror here is the system itself, the way unchecked greed, environmental collapse, corporate corruption grind people down, chew them up, and spit them out. Sometimes literally. The message still hits hard. In a world where people are treated as products, Soilent Green is a warning. Even though their population predictions were a little off, the film's themes about environmental collapse, resource scarcity, and the extremes people will go to when survival is on the line still hit hard today. That's why it remains such a classic. It's not just about the cannibalism, it's about what happens when we let greed consume us. We Are What We Are, 2013. The last movie on our list is We Are What We Are, a remake of a Mexican movie with the same name. When the family matriarch suddenly dies during a storm, her teenage daughters, Iris and Rose, must step up to maintain their ancestral rituals under the watchful eye of their domineering father, Frank. What begins as a somber family drama gradually reveals its horrifying secrets. The Parkers aren't just mourning, they're hiding a centuries-old tradition of ritual cannibalism dating back to their ancestors' desperate survival during a brutal winter. As the local doctor begins investigating a strange bone found downstream from the Parker property, the family's carefully constructed facade starts to crumble. The doctor is putting the pieces together in his office, staring at medical reports that reveal something chilling. Mrs. Parker had been suffering from a brain disease, the kind of brain disorder you only get from one specific activity, consuming human flesh. The girls are finally reaching their breaking point. They're whispering about escape plans while their father's distracted, making a desperate pact to flee to the city while Frank's asleep. Rose sneaks around gathering supplies, managing to snatch the car keys while Frank's locked in his room reciting those eerie religious prayers we've heard throughout the film. But Frank is spiraling too. In one of the film's most disturbing moments, he deliberately poisons what's left of their dinner with arsenic. The girls try to get away from him after this. One of the most horrific scenes in the film is when the girls attack their father and rip out the flesh from his body and eat him until he dies. The film hits hardest in its quiet moments. Iris reluctantly accepting her new role, Rose questioning their traditions, the father's unwavering, frightening commitment to continuing the family ways. This film absolutely deserves a spot on our list because it elevates the cannibal subgenre beyond mere shock value. It's essentially a twisted coming-of-age story wrapped in religious fanaticism and family loyalty. The film asks uncomfortable questions about how far we'll go to honor our heritage and what happens when we finally confront the horrors of our own traditions. Marvelous verdict! Well, with that guys, we've come to the end of yet another video. The portrayal of cannibals in film has come a long way, starting from their portrayal as villains to then being shown as anti-heroes. In many instances, these people have embraced the role of a sympathetic lead. These days, cannibals are shown more as victims of the pressures of society, as symbols of struggles. What do you guys think about all this? Do you agree? Are there any more cannibal films we should have included that you would like us to talk about? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section down below. If you enjoyed watching this video, remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more just like it. Otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.